He helped her fix her car. Then a Black Hawk landed out of nowhere. The wind howled like a living thing through the mountains, driving snow sideways against the windows of Cole's garage. Ethan Cole wiped his hands on an oil-stained rag and glanced at the clock, 9:47 p.m. The blizzard had been raging for 3 hours, and Highway 12 was already impassable. Smart folks were home by now, huddled around fireplaces with hot coffee and warm blankets. The phone rang, its shrill cry cutting through the storm's roar. Cole's garage. His voice carried the rough edge of a man who'd learned to keep words spare. "Please, I need help." The woman's voice was steady but strained. "My car broke down on Miller's Ridge Road, about 5 miles up from the junction." Ethan's jaw tightened. Miller's Ridge in this weather was a death trap. A narrow ribbon of asphalt that hugged the mountainside with a 100-foot drop on one side and sheer rock on the other. "Ma'am, I need you to stay in your vehicle. Keep the engine running if you can. Stay warm. I'm coming." "Thank you." The line went quiet, except for the wind whistling through her phone. "I'll be waiting." 20 minutes later, Ethan's tow truck crawled up the treacherous road, its headlights barely penetrating the white wall of snow. His hands gripped the wheel with practiced calm, the same steady control that had kept him alive in places far more dangerous than these mountains. The radio crackled with weather updates, temperatures dropping to -15, winds gusting to 60 miles per hour. He found her car half buried in a drift, its hazard lights blinking like a distress beacon. The sedan had slid sideways across the road, blocking what little passage remained. Through the storm, he could make out a figure in the driver's seat. Ethan pulled his truck ahead and killed the engine. The cold hit him like a physical blow as he stepped out, snow immediately stinging his face. He pulled his wool cap down and trudged to the stranded vehicle. The woman rolled down her window as he approached. Even in the dim light, he could see her composure, chin up, alert eyes scanning his face before meeting his gaze directly. Not panicked, prepared. "I'm Ethan Cole," he called over the wind. "Let's get you out of here." Rachel Stone. She gathered her belongings with efficient movements. "Engine died about an hour ago. I tried calling AAA first, but they don't come up here in weather like this." Ethan studied her car's position. The rear wheels were off the pavement, suspended over the embankment. "We'll need to winch it back onto the road before I can tow it." "You hurt?" "No injuries." She stepped out of the car, pulling a heavy coat tight around her shoulders. "What do you need me to do?" Most people would be crying or cursing by now. This woman was asking how to help. Ethan nodded toward his truck. "Stay warm in the cab. This'll take a few minutes." As Rachel climbed into the passenger seat, something fell from her jacket pocket onto the snow. Ethan bent to retrieve it, a military ID card, the plastic already frosting over. He wiped it clean and read the name. Captain Rachel Stone, MD, U.S. Army Medical Corps. The world seemed to tilt. The wind faded to a whisper, and suddenly he was back in Afghanistan, blood soaking the desert sand, shrapnel tearing through his squad. A medic rushing toward them under heavy fire, dark hair streaming from beneath her helmet, shouting orders with absolute authority. "Stay with me, soldier. You're going home." But that medic had never seen his face. Not really. By the time they'd pulled him from the wreckage, his features had been destroyed by the blast. 3 years of surgeries had rebuilt him into someone else entirely. Ethan's hand trembled as he slipped the ID into his coat pocket. After all these years, after everything that had happened, she was here. The woman who'd saved his life and never knew it. The winch cable sang through the storm as Ethan worked to pull her car back onto solid ground. His movements were automatic, muscle memory taking over while his mind reeled. Rachel Stone, Captain Stone. The medic who'd crawled through gunfire to reach him, who'd held pressure on his wounds while calling for evacuation, who'd whispered reassurances as he slipped in and out of consciousness. She'd saved 12 soldiers, that day before taking shrapnel herself. He'd heard the story later, in the hospital, when they told him his entire squad had been KIA, including him, officially. The paperwork had been filed, families notified. By the time anyone realized their mistake, Ethan had already decided to stay dead. Almost finished, he called to Rachel, securing the car to his tow rig. The storm was getting worse, if that was possible. They needed to get off this mountain. The drive back to town took 45 minutes that felt like hours. Rachel sat quietly, beside him, occasionally directing the truck's vents to clear the fogging windshield. Her presence filled the cab with a strange tension, not uncomfortable but charged with something neither of them could name. You military? The question came out before Ethan could stop himself. Rachel's shoulders stiffened slightly. Former, you, Army, long time ago, Afghanistan? 3 tours. He kept his eyes on the road, fighting the urge to tell her everything. You? 2 deployments, field surgeon. Her voice carried the weight of memories best left buried. Got out 2 years ago. They reached the bottom of the mountain and turned onto Main Street. Pine Ridge looked like a ghost town in the storm, streetlights casting pale circles in the swirling snow. Ethan pulled into his garage and hit the button to raise the bay door. You can call whoever you need to from inside, he said, killing the engine. Coffee's on the burner. Rachel followed him into the garage's small office, rubbing her hands together for warmth. The space was spartanly furnished: desk, phone, coffee maker, and a single folding chair. No pictures, no personal items except for a small American flag, thumbtacked to the wall. Thank you. She accepted the steaming mug he offered. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't answered. Somebody always answers around here. Ethan settled behind his desk, studying her face in the better light. She was older now, lines around her eyes that hadn't been there in Afghanistan, but the same steady hands, the same direct gaze that had looked right through him as she'd worked to save his life. Rachel pulled out her phone and frowned. No signal. Towers are probably down. Storm knocked out half the county. He gestured toward his landline. You're welcome to use that. She dialed a number, waited, then left a voicemail. This is Dr. Rachel Stone. I was supposed to be in Denver tomorrow morning for my interview at Presbyterian Medical Center, but I'm stranded in Pine Ridge due to the storm. I'll call as soon as I can get there. Interview. Ethan caught the tension in her voice, the careful professionalism that didn't quite hide her anxiety. Important meeting? Job interview. I've been trying to get back into medicine for... She trailed off, then seemed to make a decision. For 8 months now. This was my first real opportunity. What happened? Rachel was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee. PTSD. Made a mistake during a surgery. Nothing fatal, but enough to cost me my license temporarily. Hospital let me go. State medical board suspended me pending evaluation. I've been working as a paramedic while waiting for reinstatement. The honesty in her admission hit Ethan like a physical blow. Here was someone else carrying the weight of their service, fighting battles that never really ended. The dreams still come, he said quietly. She looked up sharply. What? Afghanistan, Iraq, wherever you were. The dreams don't care about your discharge papers. Recognition flickered in her eyes. No, they don't. Outside, the wind rattled the garage doors. Ethan stood and walked to the window, watching snow pile against the glass. You can't drive in this. Roads won't be clear until tomorrow afternoon, at the earliest. I'll find a motel. Nothing's open. Storm hit too fast. He turned back to her. I've got a spare room upstairs. Clean sheets, space heater. No charge. Rachel hesitated. In her position, stranded with a stranger, most people would be cautious. But something in Ethan's eyes, a familiar haunted quality, she recognized in her own mirror, made the decision for her. Thank you. I accept. The apartment above the garage was as sparse as the office below. 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, a living area furnished with military precision. Rachel set her bag on the couch and looked around. You live alone? 13 years now. Ethan pulled blankets from a closet. Moved here after I got out. Town needed a mechanic. I needed somewhere quiet. No family? Not anymore. The words came out harder than he'd intended. Everyone thinks I died in Afghanistan. Rachel went very still. What do you mean? Ethan sat heavily on the couch, the weight of secrets suddenly unbearable. Roadside bomb, My squad was coming back from a patrol when it went off. By the time they found me, I was so torn up they couldn't tell who I was. Mixed up my dog tags with another soldier's, Jimmy Chen, good kid from San Francisco. Jesus. Took 3 years to put my face back together. When I was finally coherent enough to tell them who I was, Jimmy's family had already buried an empty coffin. Mine had done the same. Seemed easier to stay dead than put everyone through more grief. Rachel's hands were shaking now. What unit were you with? 2nd Battalion, 87th Infantry. He looked at her directly. Outside Kandahar, March 15th, 2018. The color drained from her face. She knew that date, that place. Ethan watched her relive it. The emergency call, the desperate race across hostile ground, the chaos of treating multiple casualties under fire. There were survivors, she whispered. 12 men. I worked on all of them. You saved all of them. No. Rachel shook her head. 3 died before we could get them to the hospital. The others, all lived because of you. She stared at him, pieces clicking into place. I never saw their faces, not clearly. Too much blood, too much chaos. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. You were there. You held my head while the helicopter came, kept talking to me, telling me about your hometown in Montana, how the mountains looked in winter. Ethan's voice cracked. You said you were going to make sure I saw snow again. Tears streamed down Rachel's face now. I remember. You kept asking about your squad, whether they were okay. I lied and said everyone was fine because I didn't want you to give up. You saved my life twice that day. Once with your hands and once with your lies. They sat in silence, the weight of revelation settling between them. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the mountains, but inside the small apartment, 2 broken soldiers had found something they'd both thought was lost forever. Connection. Why didn't you ever come forward? Rachel asked finally. Guilt. The word came out like a confession. I lived when better men died. Seemed like cheating to claim my old life back. And punishment? Ethan nodded. Maybe. I know about punishment. Rachel wiped her eyes. The surgery I messed up, it was a routine procedure. Kid had been in a car accident, needed his spleen. Removed. Should have been simple, but I was having flashbacks during the operation. Started seeing wounded soldiers instead of a 17-year-old boy. My hands shook. I made a mistake with the sutures. He lived, but barely. PTSD isn't a choice. Tell that to the medical board. Tell that to the boy's parents. She stood and walked to the window. I spent 5 years saving lives in Afghanistan, and one bad day erased all of it. That's not true, isn't it? She turned back to him. What have either of us done since we got home? You're hiding in a garage, pretending to be dead. I'm fighting for scraps, trying to prove I'm still worthy of saving lives. We're both ghosts. The truth of it hit them both. They'd survived the tea, war only to become casualties of the peace. The interview tomorrow, Ethan said. It's important to you. It's everything to me. Presbyterian Medical is one of the few hospitals willing to consider someone with my record. If I don't get this job... She didn't finish the sentence. Ethan made a decision that surprised them both. You'll make it to Denver. The roads, not by road. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through old contacts he hadn't used in years. I know someone who owes me a favor. The call took 10 minutes and cost Ethan 13 years of carefully maintained isolation. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez, now running a private helicopter service out of Colorado Springs, was initially skeptical, then shocked, then quietly furious that his old friend had been hiding all these years. A Black Hawk? Rachel asked after Ethan hung up. Military surplus. Marcus bought it after he got out, does mountain rescues and medical transports. Ethan met her eyes. He'll be here at 0800. Weather's supposed to break around dawn. I can't. Ask you to? You didn't ask. I offered. He stood suddenly restless. Besides, I need to make a call of my own. The second call was harder. Directory assistants connected him to Fort Carson, then a maze of transfers before he finally reached the right office. Colonel Sarah Martinez personnel sounded tired and skeptical until Ethan started reciting service numbers and classified mission details that only someone who'd been there could know. "This is impossible," she said finally. "Sergeant Ethan Cole died in Afghanistan in 2018. Check the DNA records from Walter Reed. Cross-reference with the facial reconstruction surgeries performed between 2018 and 2021. Patient number 4471B. Silence stretched across the line. "Why now? Why are you coming forward now?" Ethan looked at Rachel, who was pretending not to listen while making her own preparations for tomorrow. "Because I met someone who reminded me that some debts can never be repaid, but they can be honored." The rest of the night passed in conversation and careful revelation. They talked about the war, about the years since, about the weight of survival and the cost of silence. Rachel told him about her childhood in Montana, her decision to become a doctor, her dream of working in trauma surgery. Ethan shared pieces of his old life, the family farm in Iowa, his parents' grief, his sister's wedding that he'd watched from afar through social media. As dawn approached, the storm finally began to weaken. Through the windows, they could see the first gray light filtering through clearing clouds. "You nervous?" Ethan asked, terrified. Rachel adjusted her interview clothes, a professional suit she'd pressed with the apartment's ancient iron. "You?" "Same." At exactly Ujur 800, the sound of rotor blades echoed through the valley. Ethan and Rachel stepped outside to see a Black Hawk helicopter settling onto the snow-covered parking lot beside the garage. The downwash sent powder swirling in crystalline clouds. Marcus Rodriguez climbed out of the pilot's seat, his face a mixture of joy and anger. He was older now, grayer, but he moved with the same controlled precision Ethan remembered from their army days. "You son of a bitch," Marcus said, pulling Ethan into a fierce embrace. 13 years. 13 goddamn years of thinking you were dead." "I'm sorry." "You better be." Marcus stepped back, studying his friend's rebuilt features. "Jesus, what they did to you. But the eyes are the same." Rachel approached carrying her small travel bag. "Thank you for this. Both of you." "Ma'am." Marcus tipped his cap. "Any friend of this ghost is a friend of mine." As Rachel climbed into the helicopter, Ethan caught her arm. "Good luck." "What about you? What happens when the army comes?" "I guess I find out who I am when I'm not hiding." The Black Hawk lifted off, carrying Rachel toward Denver and her future. Ethan watched until it disappeared into the morning sky, then walked back into his garage. For the first time in 13 years, he felt like he might be ready to stop running from his past. 3 hours later, 2 military vehicles pulled up outside Cole's garage. Colonel Martinez was younger than Ethan had expected, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She was accompanied by Master Sergeant Williams from the personnel office, and a chaplain whose presence suggested they weren't sure what they were dealing with. "Sergeant Cole." The colonel's voice carried 13 years of questions. "Ma'am." "No, ma'am." She studied his face, comparing it to photos on a tablet. "The DNA will take 48 hours to confirm, but the surgical records match, and frankly, no one else would know half the things you told us last night." "What happens now?" "That depends on you." Colonel Martinez gestured toward the garage's small office. "May we sit?" Over the next hour, they worked through 13 years of bureaucratic impossibility. Officially, Ethan Cole had died in Afghanistan. His family had been notified, benefits paid, grave marker placed. Bringing him back to life would require navigation through layers of military and civilian bureaucracy that boggled the mind. "We can make this work," the colonel said finally. "But it's going to take time. Months, probably. And there will be questions. Lots of them." "I understand. There's something else." She looked uncomfortable. "Your unit, what's left of it, they've been campaigning for years to have you posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. Testimony from survivors indicates you drew enemy fire away from wounded soldiers, allowing them to be evacuated. You saved lives at the cost of your own, or so we thought. Medal of Honor." The words hit Ethan like another IED blast. "I don't deserve—" "That's not your decision, Sergeant. It's ours." Colonel Martinez stood. The ceremony was scheduled for next month at Arlington. Obviously, that changes things. After the Army delegation left, Ethan sat alone in his garage, surrounded by the tools and oil stains that had defined his life for 13 years. Everything was changing, and he wasn't sure he was ready for it. His phone rang. Rachel. "How did it go?" she asked. "Got the job," she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Start Monday. They want me in their trauma surgery program." "That's incredible." "What about you?" "The Army?" "It's complicated. They want to give me a medal." "You deserve it." "Do I?" "I hid for 13 years while my family mourned. While my unit carried the weight of thinking they'd failed to save me." "Ethan," Rachel's voice was firm, "you survived. That's not something to apologize for. And now you're choosing to live again. That takes more courage than dying." 2 weeks later, Pine Ridge's small population gathered in the town square for something they'd never expected to see, a military ceremony honoring one of their own. Word had spread quickly through the close-knit community. Ethan Cole, the quiet mechanic who'd lived among them for over a decade, was not only a war hero, but officially back from the dead. The story had captured national attention, bringing reporters and camera crews to the small mountain town. But for Ethan, standing at attention in a dress uniform that felt foreign after so many years, the only person who mattered was the woman in surgical scrubs who'd driven up from Denver to be there. Rachel had insisted on being present, despite her, demanding new schedule at Presbyterian Medical. She stood with the townspeople, many of whom had become her neighbors during their brief but transformative encounter. Colonel Martinez read the citation with practiced precision. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty, Sergeant Ethan Cole distinguished himself by acts of gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty while serving with the 2nd Battalion, 87th Infantry Regiment. As the medal was placed around his neck, Ethan caught Rachel's eye. She was crying, he realized, not tears of sadness but of pride and completion. They had both found their way back to the living. After the ceremony, as the crowd began to disperse and reporters packed their equipment, Rachel approached him. "How does it feel?" she asked. Ethan touched the medal, still adjusting to its weight. "Strange, like I'm wearing someone else's life." "Maybe you are. Maybe that's the point." She smiled. "The old Ethan Cole died in that desert. This one, the one who rescued me, who called in favors to get me to my interview, who had the courage to come back to life. He's someone new." "What?" "About you? Still the same Rachel Stone?" "No." She looked back toward her car, where her hospital ID badge hung from the rearview mirror. "I think I might be someone new too. Someone who remembers that saving lives, including my own, is what I was meant to do." As she drove away, heading back to Denver and her new life, Ethan remained in the town square. The snow had begun to fall again, light flakes that caught the afternoon sun. For the first time in 13 years, he didn't see the storm as something to hide from. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Beer tonight? I'm buying. After all, it's not every day your dead friend comes back to life. Ethan." Smiled and typed back, "Make it 2 beers. I've got 13 years to catch up on." Walking back toward his garage, his home, Ethan felt the weight of the medal against his chest. But more than that, he felt the lightness of finally being alive again. The war was over. The hiding was done. And sometimes, he thought, the best way to honor the past is to have the courage to build a future. The Black Hawk that had changed everything was long gone, but its impact remained. 2 broken soldiers had found their way back to wholeness, not through forgetting their scars, but by learning that some wounds can only heal when shared with someone who understands the weight of survival. In the distance, a train whistle echoed through the mountains, a sound of journeys beginning, of destinations waiting to be reached. Ethan Cole, no longer a ghost, walked toward his tomorrow.